have the privilege today of being at the premises of the famous open pit copper mine of Boliden Aitik in the north of Sweden. I'm joined today by Anders Sand, who is the research manager for Boliden Mines, and we will talk about the future of mining in Europe. I would like to ask you a couple of questions about mining in Europe. So first of all, at Boliden, you own 5 different mines or mining regions. You've been touted as the climate leader by the Financial Times. What makes your mining operations so different from other mines in the rest of the world?
I think one big difference is that we have been working a lot with our CO2 footprint, and that goes both for the mining but also for the smelter activities. So we have a program that has been ongoing for many years related to electrification of the mining fleet, which would include both the trucks but also excavators and other types of equipment. And in addition to that, we have a lot of other projects ongoing as well to reduce the CO2.
And in terms of the electrification, you are probably also blessed by loads of green electricity. Yes. Is that the case?
That is actually a good benefit here in Sweden, and that most of our operations are in the north here, where we have good access to green energy. However, this is not the case in the operations in Finland and on Ireland. So there we also need to look at additional measures to keep down the footprint so that we can be a leader and have a low footprint per ton of metal produced.
Yeah, so you mentioned CO2 impact, but of course we need a lot more than reducing our CO2 footprint. So in terms of use of reagents, any special programs there?
We are constantly evaluating new reagents that would replace the fossil-based xanthates that we now normally use. So we are collaborating both with suppliers of chemicals, but also we have more high-risk research projects ongoing where we are evaluating completely novel reagents. So we have a lot of activities in this area. And in addition, we also work a lot with water treatment technology, and we even have Boliden patented technologies that are world unique and are building also plants now at mine sites to treat the water in terms of nitrogen and sulfates.
And in terms of the metals that you try to recover, a lot of mining in the world is focused on one specific metal, and then they don't really care about all the byproduct metals. What's your philosophy there?
We are very much looking actually at byproduct potentials, and that goes both for the ores that we mine, but also for the different residues that we have. I would say that probably like 30 or 40% of the R&D activities in process technology would be related to finding possible byproducts and extracting that economically, but also to reduce the environmental footprint.
So with your 5 different mines and mining regions, which energy transition metals are you actually targeting at this moment?
The site that's actually, I think, most close to potential full implementation would be the Luikonlahti site in Finland, where we have a mining operation that has been closed down. But we have a residue that's rich in cobalt and nickel in specific. So that would be a very significant contribution actually to the EU self-sufficiency at the same time as it would be part of our remediation of this site.
So nickel, cobalt and other energy transition metals?
It could also be cobalt, and we have operations also for tellurium, which is used in solar cells. We have the only mining operation in the world where we extract tellurium as part of the primary production. So we are looking a lot at energy transition metals.
Yeah, let us talk about the elephant in the room of the mining sector. The T word, tailings. What happens with the tailings? The horrible word that nobody wants to pronounce.
Yes.
Mining produces tailings. We can see your tailing pond here behind us. Millions and millions of tons of tailings. So what's your approach there?
If you look at the bulk of the tailings, actually you have a lot of compounds there that could be useful for construction material purposes, for instance. So that could be like calcite or other types of compounds. So actually that we are looking at several sites. For that to be possible, however, it has to be fairly close to the market because these products are usually of lower value compared to the primary ores.
So if your transport issue,
yes,
large
we
volumes,
have to consider that. Yes,
no.
So that is usually the challenge. But also, of course, in terms of tailings handling, we try to do separation at many sites into high and low sulfur tailings, where the low sulfur tailings would then be fairly benign and easy to handle in terms of the reclamation and during the ongoing operations. While the high sulfur fraction we would be able to take care of in a smaller size dam. We could do that very responsibly with very high safety standards. And then we, of course, have the byproduct potential also from this residue.
And I've seen the projections for working together with LKAB in the REMAP project, where you would actually have some kind of industrial symbiosis where your pyrite tailings would be combined with the iron ore tailings from even higher here in Sweden, in Kiruna. What's the challenges there, and how close is this to come to fruition?
I would say it's very close to coming to fruition. We are at a quite advanced stage looking at this process also on pilot level. And I would say actually it's a beautiful process. I mean, you will use one waste from our site to treat something that is a waste at another mine site, and together you would produce valuable products. For instance, fertilizers and gypsum for construction material, rare earth elements, quite a big percentage of the EU need actually, and some other byproducts as well.
And how many years do you think you need before this will actually happen in Sweden?
The LKAB plan actually with their plant would be that it should be constructed within a few years. So if things go as planned, I think we are very close actually to having this in operation.
Okay, that sounds great. Let's now talk about the afterlife of mining in Europe, because that's one of the huge aspects, of course, which many environmental activists would talk about. You're leaving a certain scar on the environment, you would say. You have this open pit, which is a huge hole of 500 meters deep in this case. You have your large tailing pond. You can't valorize all those materials in buildings because there's not enough people living in this area, so that's quite clear. You can't use all of that material. So what are the plans for both the open pit and for this huge tailing pond?
So maybe to start with, I would say that no activity doesn't have an impact, and it is the same with mining, that you would have an impact. It would not look the same when you started as it will be in the end. But then, of course, you need to have a good plan for the reclamation of the site. And what would happen here in Aitik is that the open pit would be filling up with water, so it would become a lake in the end. And then the tailings would be filled with soil on top and be reforested, or it would be like a plain.
And do you need special permits for such a rehabilitation project, or is that something you can do?
Actually, it is part of the permit we have. So you have to renew the permits, the environmental permit regularly, and the reclamation is part of that permit. Normally, you have to revise it within certain time intervals and renew it. But it's always part.
Is that standard for every open pit mine in Europe, or is that specifically for Sweden?
As far as I know, I would say that you have to have a rehabilitation plan at every site, even before you start an activity there. Then you can revise it while you are running, but you always need to have some form of plan. It goes for Europe, I would say, but in many other places in the world, you don't do that, not the way we do.
But speaking of Europe, we have this Tesla paradox. Europeans want Teslas, well, some of them do, but they don't want the mines in the backyard to produce the metals that are required for these fancy cars. So if you speak about mining in Europe, we see there's a lot of resistance. On the other hand, when I come here to North Sweden or to North Finland, I have the impression that the local population is proud of having a mine in their backyard. What makes you North Scandinavians so different from the rest of the European population?
I would say that the people that are normally most positive to mines, that will be people that live in mining communities, even if they don't work hands-on with mining themselves, because they know what mining is and they know that the mines can be responsible in the way they operate.
But is that just the case for European mines, or do you think you can extrapolate that to the rest of the world as well?
I think you can extrapolate it, but you need to make certain considerations when you start a mine, for instance, to hire local people and provide jobs and kind of an economic support to the area through the mining activities. So actually it should be beneficial for the people there. It shouldn't be a fly-in, fly-out activity where you have experts coming and taking resources from someone else. It should be working in symbiosis with the society around, actually.
Yeah, coming back to European raw material strategy, we all know that Europe is critically dependent on a number of critical metals, including energy transition metals such as lithium, nickel, cobalt, rare earths, which we really need to have this climate transition towards climate neutrality. So everybody in Europe agrees that we need to build up a strategy, but yet we realize that recycling alone is not going to save us, even in the best case. If we recycle, for example, all spent lithium-ion batteries, it would only cover for something like 10% of our needs in 2040 for lithium, cobalt, nickel for the new batteries. So yes, we need recycling, obviously, we need reprocessing, but the only logical conclusion when you look at the numbers is that you need more primary mining. So we need to ask the question, why don't we develop responsible mining projects within the boundaries of Europe? When I look at all the potential new mines in Europe, like Norra Char, like Savannah resources in the north of Portugal, I have the impression that it's impossible today to start a new mine. Do you have any plans yourself to develop new mines? And what is your general idea about new mines in Europe?
We have projects ongoing all the time, both to expand our existing operations, but also with new mine sites, if you will. But I would agree with you there that it is getting extremely difficult with permitting and different types of legislation that actually interact and kind of creates barriers in all directions to start new mines. So this is a bit troublesome for Europe, I would say, and for the self-sufficiency. Because we see now also with Russia and so on that we cannot expect to get the raw material we want from elsewhere and be sure to get that in the future. We really have to think about how do we create our own domestic supply that we can trust long term. And of course, you shouldn't exclude recycling or reprocessing of residues and so on. That's definitely part of the picture. But as you say, if you have a transition ongoing, you need much more metals, and just due to the growth of that demand, you need also primary mining. You cannot get away from that in the equation.
Do you have the idea that the European Commission itself is actually facilitating this transition towards primary mining of energy transition metals within the boundaries of Europe? Do you have the impression that they're actually helping us to establish that agenda, or do you have the feeling that it's ambiguous and uncertain and unclear? And what would your advice be towards these people from DG Grow, DG Environment who are writing all the policies?
I would say that there are many people and many entities on European level that actually understand this and that are supportive of mining. But also you have others that are against. So it's a very ambiguous, mixed picture. But since you have also different legislations interacting, it doesn't help if one entity is pro and maybe creating policies or something that would support primary production. if you have others that create very effective blockages. So I think actually different DGs, for instance, they should sit together and think about what is the problem we have, get a more holistic view of what is the problem and what is our needs, and how do we make a good compromise that everyone can live with.
I have personally the impression that Europe is quite naive compared to America and Japan in terms of raw material strategy, who are much clearer in their roadmap. If they think something is necessary, they just do it. And in Europe, it seems like we are so democratic, which is good in a way, but in reality, in the raw material strategy, everything is so cumbersome and so slow. So if you would have a crystal ball and you would look into the future, 10 years further on, which new mines do you think will be operational? That's my final question.
I'm still an optimist, so I think sooner or later you will realize that you will need the mine resources to do the transitions you need in society. I mean, the truth will always prevail at some point. So that's actually my optimistic take on the future.
Which mine do you think will be operational in 10 years? Which new mine?
I think we have some projects that would be running within that time frame. We have more or less new sites that we would like to start up in northern Sweden.
Not lithium, that's more nickel cobalt.
That's actually a copper deposit that we are looking at. It's called Laver. I think we will see more mining in Finland, maybe in the historic Outokumpu area, and also maybe in Portugal with a lot of lithium deposits. So I think there is very good geological potential in Europe once you have the political will as well. Currently you don't have that.
Okay, let's hope that this interview helps convincing people to develop a clear, unambiguous raw material strategy. I would like to thank you for this interview and a wonderful visit. Thank you.